There's no way around it, EJ. 2022 really, 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 really sucked for Broncos fans. Relative to expectations, possibly the most miserable Broncos season we've had in the last 20, 25 years. They've had worse records, they've had worse stats, but in terms of where we thought they would be versus what they actually were, I don't know if I'm ever going to see a more miserable Broncos season. With all due respect to Braden Perna. I know he's probably watching this right now. It was horrible. But 2023 is a new year. New coach, new talent, maybe a rejuvenated Russ. A slimmed down Russ, by the way.
A little less Russ.
A little less Russ. Maybe he stopped cooking so much. I know, that's horrible. God, Jay, please save me and cut that out.
Get us out of here, Jay.
I grabbed a special bottle for this one. I've had this for a few years now. Breckenridge bourbon from I don't know, how close to Denver is Breckenridge? Like an hour and a half?
Yeah, it's up in the mountains.
Something like that. Sure. It's really good stuff. One of my favorite bourbons. Also not terribly expensive. So if you're looking for a really good bourbon that doesn't cost like $90 a bottle, looking at you, Eagle Rare, go get Breckenridge. Really damn good. And it's an appropriate spirit, I think, to guide us through the dumpster fire that was the 2022 Broncos and, maybe toast to what could potentially be a very good 2023 Broncos team.
It has to be better for a lot of Broncos fans' sakes. Their sanity, their physical well-being, there are a lot of things that got smashed last year in Colorado. So for the furniture's sake, I hope that all the changes, and we both believe that all the changes will add up to a better Broncos season because, boy, it couldn't be much worse. Now, that being said, I put all the statistics together for this, and when I was going through, I was actually surprised at how competent they were versus how bad their record was. They were a team that played a little better than their record, but boy, their record was putrid.
They were also the most injured team in the league, which probably contributed to that. There was a stat, it was from Football Outsiders, Aaron Schatz put together. And it's essentially like games lost for starters, yep. Right? Like combined number of games lost for starters. Broncos were number one far and away last year at 148.6 total games lost, you could say.
Yeah.
Like the next closest team was not even in their zip code. Like Tennessee was ranked second and the Rams ranked third, and the gap between the Broncos and the Titans was larger than the gap between the Titans and the 8th place team. So the Broncos got beat up last year. Yeah. Nathaniel Hackett was in over his skis. It just, nothing worked. And even, we were there week one. Like we were there in week one in Seattle. And even that week we were kind of looking at each other going, I don't know about this. It doesn't feel right, and it just never felt right.
We thought they'd be better was the common refrain even in week one, and that was to the Seahawks fans rejoicing and the Broncos fans like, it'll even out, it'll be fine. It never did. Overall, 5-12, last in the division. Home record of 4-4, which was decent for the home folks. Road record abysmal, 1-8. They could not win to save their life on the road. Last 5 games, 2-3. There was some uptick as they got some players back well after most people had stopped watching. But overall, this team never felt like it had any power, or even after the first few weeks, like you expected them to win. It was a team that you were like, I don't know, maybe if things go really, really right, they could steal one, and that was about as close as they got to actual true power. So when we're trying to sum up how good or bad they were as a football team, we've got something called the effectiveness summary this year. We take their league rank in 6 different categories, and we're using EPA per play as our base stat for rushing and passing, defense against the run, defense against the pass, and then the last 2 we're throwing in there are points scored and points allowed. So those 6 statistics overall give us a pretty good idea of how good or bad a football team is at doing its job. For the Broncos, they were 24th in the league in rushing offense. Not great, not terrible, but getting close.
Bottom third.
Bottom third.
Bottom quartile, technically.
Passing offense, the same. Also 24th. That's not a good number in the modern NFL. If you're 24th in passing, you are not winning a lot of games. That was reflected in their record. Now, rush defense, they could stop the run. They were 8th overall in the league. And we've talked multiple times already in this series about teams that had trouble stopping the run and therefore had very long seasons. The Broncos could stop the run, and they still had a very long season. Okay, pass coverage. How well did they do at stopping other teams' aerial attacks? Strangely enough, also 8th. So 24th, 8th, 8th. Those are pretty good ranks overall. 2 top 10 ranks. You'd figure this team had more than 5 wins. Again, like I said, the win number didn't translate to how well they played in some areas on the field. Now then, why did that happen? Points scored, 32nd, dead last, 287 points scored. You are not winning a lot of football games in the modern NFL if you don't even score 300 points in a season, and the Broncos didn't even tickle 300 points.
It's almost hard to be that bad at scoring.
You need to almost self-sabotage. That is a terrible number. Now, when we get down to points allowed, again, reflecting those really good defensive EPA numbers, they were 14th, which is totally fine. If you're mid-pack in points allowed, you should win a lot of games, but the offense was so terrible. 24th in rushing, 24th in passing, 32nd in scoring. And that was really the tail of the tape for the 2022 Broncos. That's what doomed them.
What I found really interesting about their offense, and maybe you could consider this like the over-encompassing reason for everything, right? They were 14th in red zone touchdown percentage, meaning the amount of red zone trips they converted into touchdowns. They were 14th in the NFL at 55.56%. So solid, right?
Not bad.
Here's the problem.
Herein lies the problem.
They were dead last in red zone appearances at about 2.1 per game. That was by far least amount in the NFL. Top teams, hold on, I have it right here. Top teams in terms of red zone scoring attempts per game. Obviously, Kansas City, 4.2. Detroit, 4. Minnesota, 3.8. Phillies at 3.8. Like, even pretty much the entire top half of the league was 3 or more, and they were about 2. So you can't score points if you don't get into the red zone, they just could not get into the red zone. They were not really good at generating explosives in between the 20s. Feels like every drive had to be this just methodical slog. It just didn't work. It never worked. And, maybe injuries was a big reason for that. I think it'd be ignorant to say that it wasn't. Yeah. But also, Russ didn't play well, and Hackett just wasn't a good coach. That's why he didn't last very long. So everything kind of just congealed together into this horrible horse-shaped mess. And I think everybody would love to forget it as soon as possible.
The term congealed pretty much sums up the Broncos season in 2022. Anyways, when we take those 6 league ranks, add them all together and divide by 6, our bootleg power score for the Broncos is 18.3 raw. That rounds to 18. That's not terrible. Again, if you're thinking of 18, that's mid-pack. Again, lower is better with a bootleg power score. You're trying to be number 1. It's like golf scores. You would look at a team that was 18th and say, so they won like 8 or 9 games, right? And they didn't. They won 5. So they played under expectations, and you mentioned at the top, like, we forget, like how quickly we forget what the mood around Denver football was after the Russ trade. They were assuming this was the move that was going to power them to the top of the division, to the playoffs, hopefully to the Super Bowl, and man, did the wheels fall off quick.
Quick point of clarification, by the way, for those keeping track at home. There's a bunch of people that have watched a bunch of these now, and they've seen a bunch of teams at 18. We don't mean that they were 18th in the NFL in terms of power score. When we do the rounding to 18, that's just like the closest number, right, for the average. The Broncos were 22nd if we're just going off of raw power score numbers. There were 6 total teams. 6 total teams that if we rounded it, it got to 18, but they were 22nd in the NFL. But again, there's a whole bunch that are grouped together. The Seahawks were at 17.5. The Browns were at 17.6. The Jets were also at 17.6. Chargers at 18 flat. Commanders at 18.1. Broncos at 18.3. So again, bunch of teams
That's right.
grouped there. Doesn't mean that they were 18th in the NFL. They were actually worse. They were 22nd. But I just want to clarify for people what the power score is and how it works.
Yeah, power score is a number. It's like how tall you are.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell what rank you are in your class for height. It just says, hey, we took their 6 league ranks and we divided by 6 and we get a number. And then we stack them all. And at the end of this series, we will have power scores ranked 1 through 32. And we only had one true tie that we had to go all the way through. We went to wins is the first tiebreaker. So if you have the exact same raw score, the next tiebreaker is wins, because we're giving teams credit for being able to manufacture a win. If they had the same number of wins, which they did, we then had to go wins in division. And we had to do that once. But other than that, every team's raw power score stacked fairly neatly, and I think is a good representation. I'm pretty pleased with how power score came out, because with very few exceptions, I would say 2 or 3, power score matched up to what we saw in terms of a football product on the field.
For reference, the top 5 to 6 teams were all teams that you either went very far in the playoffs or made it all the way to the Super Bowl. And the bottom teams, predictably, were the Texans, the Colts, the Bears, the Cardinals. Like it translated pretty well.
Yeah, it
so
pencils.
Just when you guys get to the end of the series and you see how the raw scores are quote unquote ranked, it'll
Stacked.
pan out. But
Yeah.
again, don't take the 18 number, meaning 18th rank. They're
Right.
technically 22nd. 18 is just the rounded score. But anyway, to go from those numbers to even more numbers,
To more confusing
we just
numbers.
want to confuse as many people as possible.
That's right.
When we pull the scheme stats, and most of these are going to be between the 20s, right? Because red zone is kind of its own thing. I mean, even with the Broncos, again, they were a good red zone offense when they got to the red zone.
When they got
But in between the 20s, where the majority of football is played, they were objectively horrible, right?
not good.
So looking at those scheme stats between the 20s, I'll start with the passing game just because that's kind of the main topic of discussion with this team in terms of how bad they were, despite having Russell Wilson. Play action percentage, they were 28th in the NFL, mainly because they were behind a lot, and so they were just dropping back and chucking bombs. In terms of average time to throw, they were nearly 3 seconds at 2.94, which for Russ has always kind of been a thing in his career, just because he's always been a mobile quarterback, though in his age, he is less mobile than he used to be, and definitely took some sacks this year that younger Russ would not have taken. Sometimes I still think he thinks he's quicker than he is. Maybe that's why he dropped some weight this offseason. He's like, I got to make people miss again. I can't be 215, something like that.
He was getting up towards the 220s, and now is reportedly back down to the low 2.0 singles, which is what he was for legitimately the first 6 years of his career.
When he could move.
203. So,
in terms of air yards percentage, again, the percentage of their passing yards that came through the air rather than after the catch, they were 51.4% air yard percentage. That is 20th in the NFL, despite their average depth of target being 9.9 yards, which was 4th in the NFL. So they definitely took a lot of shots.
Yeah.
They just didn't complete a lot of shots. And that was a big reason why they couldn't get to the red zone, is because even though they attempted to get explosive plays, they weren't very good at actually getting those explosive plays. And it wasn't entirely because of the receiving core. They only had 2 drops on targets of 20-plus yards down the field. That was not very much relative to the rest of the NFL. They were 24th, though, in completion percentage on those targets of 20-plus yards down the field at about 30.9%. If you guys listened to the Seahawks episode last week, we talked about how efficient they were on throwing deep down the field. The other side of the Russ trade. Geno completed about 51-point-something%, which was best in the NFL. Russ was very low at about 30.9%. So that really is kind of the difference between having a functional passing game and not, is can you get chunks? Can you get into the red zone in less than 10 plays? The Broncos could not. That's why their yards per attempt was 25th in the NFL at 6.8, while the Seahawks, conversely, could, which is why they were actually a very good offense.
I'm thinking of a very Brandon Pernin-like label for that.
What's that?
Either you can get chunks or you blow chunks.
They blew chunks.
They blew chunks.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of Denver fans quite salty. Not that they were ever in the running for Geno. They didn't even want him. But the fact that the player that replaced their presumed savior played much better than he did made a few Broncos fans a little testy.
In terms of run concept frequency, kind of exactly what I expected. They were first in inside zone, which Russ-led offenses, regardless of the offensive coordinator, has always been heavy inside zone because Russ, when he's under center, pretty much the only run that they run is inside zone, or not when he's under center, when he's in shotgun, where he's more comfortable. Pretty much the main run that they've always run is inside zone. So I wasn't super shocked to see that about 40% of their rushing calls were inside zone. They were 19th in outside zone, which is pretty much only whenever Russ is under center. They never called outside zone from the gun. And to be fair, some coaches hate calling outside zone from the gun because the tracks for the running back.
Yeah, the angles get goofy.
It's super weird. It's like almost too flat. Like I don't. The Chiefs always try to make it work, and I'm like, why? Like why are we doing that? But anyway, not to get off on a tangent. They pretty much only called outside zone when they were under center, and because they weren't under center as much last year, that's why they were 19th. In terms of duo, they were also 19th. Power, they were 9th. Counter, which by the way, power is another thing they do like to run from gun. That just because the angles are a little bit better. Counter, they were 29th, which tracks because they weren't a super outside zone heavy team, and counter and outside zone usually go hand in hand. Draw, they were 15th, and pin and pull, they were 20th. So overall, you could see just from the run concept frequency how much they stuck to shotgun, and therefore how much they were behind in every freaking game. And that's why they were in gun so much, is because usually by the second quarter, things were not going well for them.
And people will talk about this, and living in the Pacific Northwest like I do, people talk about the Russ offense. And there was a question about, so what are they going to run for an offense in Denver? And our buddy Danny Kelly, who we've known for a long time, is a longtime Seahawks watcher, was like, if Russ is the quarterback, they're running the Russ offense because that's what he runs. And if you trade for him, you know that comes with him. And yes, Hackett might try and adapt it. He didn't really. But that is the package of runs that come with Russ. So in terms of surprising, not really. And again, we're talking about injuries. We're both super high on Javonte Williams. He had a great rookie season, got hurt pretty much immediately. Their leading rusher last year was Latavius Murray, 700 yards.
Yikes.
So there's a bunch of features or facets or factors here that add up to the overall success or demise of the Broncos offense. But when we look at the run game, it was the same rush package that came with Russ from Seattle. They just didn't have the guys to run it. And we've talked about a lot of teams so far in this series that want to do a certain thing, either on offense or defense, and they just didn't have the personnel to execute it at a high level. And the Broncos fall into that category in last year's offense, largely because of the injuries.
Switching over to the defensive side, I'm going to start with the defensive front because Coach Ejiro Overo last year, who was their defensive coordinator, was one of the only things that actually went right for the Broncos. He's a phenomenal coach, a former Vic Fangio assistant going back to 2011 with the 49ers. Also, fun fact, was also a Greg Roman assistant with the 49ers in that same era. Started as a QA guy under Vic, then switched to the offense for a couple of years under Roman, and then went full-time on defense with the Packers, and then coached under Staley, another Vic Fangio disciple with the Rams, and then went to Denver, and now he's Carolina, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, he's been around, but he's a really, really, really good defensive coach. And last year we started to see him get a little bit more creative in terms of how to generate pressure than a lot of Fangio tree types.
Yes.
Their blitz percentages were a lot higher than most Fangio tree coaches. They were second in bringing pressure on third and short at 71.4% of the time on third and short, which they had 41 total third and shorts last year, and they were bringing an extra guy on almost all of them.
Yeah, pretty much all of them.
They were about 60% on third and medium, So again, very, very blitz heavy there. And then on 3rd and 7+, they were still at 45%, which was 7th in the NFL. And in terms of third down stunt percentage, they were about average at 14th. So we saw them bring extra guys at a pretty significant rate. And I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, but they have a lot of good pass rushers there. Like, why do they do that? And so I went back and I looked at the depth chart in like December, right? Because that was after the Bradley Chubb trade. And I was like, who did they have as their front four at that time? And it was Nick Bonito with Jonathan Cooper rotating in behind him. And it was Baron Browning and Jacob Martin. All fine pieces.
Right.
But no, like...
alphas.
True alphas. Like they had a bunch of Robins and no Batmans. I would even argue some of those are Alfreds. And so they just didn't have the guy that could just go win. Like the closest thing they had was Draymond Jones. And so they had to throw extra bodies in there to try to get pressure. And I credit Avero for doing that and be willing to do that. I mean, obviously results speak for themselves. They were still a very good defense, but I think in a perfect world, he would rather do what most Fangio tree coaches do, which is rush 4, trust them to go whoop ass, and play solid coverage on the back end. They just didn't really get a chance to do that.
I like the coaching decision because one of my biggest frustrations for folks that have followed my work when Fangio was in Chicago was, come on, man, change it up. It's not working. You can't just walk those 4 up and get the pressure you want to. He knew he didn't have the 4. And decided to bring more almost all the time. I mean, the 3 blitz ranks are 2nd in the NFL, 2nd in the NFL, and 7th in the NFL. You're solidly top 10 in all 3 blitz metrics. He knew, even though we like a lot of those guys, we like Bonito, we like Browning, like they're good athletes, but he knew he had to bring extra guys to get pressure because he didn't have a Nick Bosa. He didn't have somebody to just put up there that was going to attract all that attention. So I credit him for shifting, given the personnel. Good coaches are going to do that. And, he might not have wanted to enough, but I'm really interested to see how much of that carries over in Carolina because he does have the horses in Carolina.
I would say Vance Joseph, by the way, getting on a slightly different track here. Vance Joseph is back in Denver as the new DC this year. I think he's going to follow a similar type of approach to maybe what Avero would have done if he had a fully healthy stable of horses. No pun intended, right? Which is...
Are you going to say let's ride anytime soon?
God, no. Dear God, no. You notice how like halfway through the season they just like stopped doing that entirely.
They were like, let's not do this anymore.
It's like, let's never play that video in the stadium ever again. Yeah. But no, like you're getting Randy Gregory back. You still got Baron Browning there, who's like, again, complimentary piece as like a Sam backer. He's the Leonard Floyd-ish type guy. They brought in Zach Allen and Matt Henningsen, who's an absolute freak of nature. And Vance Joseph, all things considered, would be content to just rush those guys. He comes from the more Wade Phillips side of defensive coaching as opposed to the Vic Fangio side. But I think just like Avero, I would wager that the blitz percentages are going to go significantly down this year.
Yeah.
But I mean that in a good way, like for a good reason, because they actually have more guys this year, knock on wood, that can actually get the passer.
Yeah, because they don't absolutely have to, right?
Yes.
That is not the only way they can generate pressure. And if we look at those defensive ranks, first team, second team on the very provisional depth chart right now, if they stay healthy, they have plenty of guys to rush the passer in any way they want to. They could be high blitz, they could be very low blitz. It'll be really interesting to see what Joseph does because he has not been a Fangio type disciple. He's been a little bit more interesting, so it'll be fascinating to see how much he splits the difference this year in Denver.
I think the coverages as well are also probably going to be oddly fairly similar. Again, Avero, even though he comes from a Fangio type background, because of the injuries and the things he had to do, they ended up playing a similar type of defense to what I think Vance Joseph's ideal defense is, which is a lot of cover 3. Like Vance plays a shitload of cover 3 because that's what Wade always did. Is we're playing a 5-man service, 2 linebackers, single high safety. We are throwing bodies to the line of scrimmage to stop the run, and we're going to be flying to the ball, playing fast, playing simple. That's what Wade did. That's what Vance does. And so last year when they were 7th to cover 3, honestly, they might even be more this year. Would not be shocked if they're even more. They were 19th in quarters, which sounds insane, relative to a lot of other Fangio tree coaches. They always play more quarters than that. Avero didn't think that he could. They probably did not have the confidence to stop the run from a too high safety look, like a lot of other defenses in that style do. They played a lot of quarter, half, but that was typically only on 3rd down, right? Yeah. They would butter you up with cover 3 on early downs, get tackles for loss, fly into the backfield, get you in 3rd and 7, and then play quarter, half. Now, the reason they were able to do that and not get absolutely fucking obliterated like the Vikings did was because they had Patrick Surtain.
You beat me to it. I was going to get there. I was like, the reason they didn't play true quarters and they played what we would call weighted quarters, which is quarter, half, is because they had the guy that can hold down the half.
Yes.
Like by himself. And if you have that player or that style of player and you can rely on him, and they can, because Patrick Surtain, my CB1 the year he was coming out, can do it, has been able to do it since he hit the league. So they were like, great, let's shift people to the other side. And he's got that side. And they had the luxury of doing that. The Vikings did not.
And so how it works, by the way, because a lot of people see Patrick Surtain as like, oh, against 3-by-1, he's playing man on the backside, right? And he's just isolated. Well, you're not going to play the half-field safety to Patrick Surtain's side because he doesn't need it, right? And you're also probably not going to play quarters to his side, and you're not going to play the half-field safety to the passing strength because, again, he doesn't need it. That basically means that we're allocating a safety to bracket the guy inside the Patrick's. Like, they're not doing that either. So how they would play quarter, half with Patrick Surtain on the field, not all the time, but a huge chunk of the time, was Surtain would play to the passing strength as the outside corner, playing essentially press man on the number 1, because, again, quarters to the passing strength, the outside threat's going to be man anyway. In a lot of quarters type defenses, that's how they do it. And then they would play half-field to the other side. And the other corners, none of them are going to be as good as Patrick Surtain, they would get the benefit of just being a cloud corner, sitting there in the flat, sinking back, have a half-field safety over the top of them. So that's kind of how they did it, where it's not, oh, we're putting Surtain one-on-one backside. It's we're putting Surtain one-on-one front side because we can.
Yeah, and with no real help. Again, he is playing very singularly. If you're sort of diagramming it up, you would circle him in the number 1 and say, carve those off. How are we going to divide up the rest of the threats with our other 2 safeties and our other essentially 2 corners when you're playing a nickel? And that gave them a lot of flexibility to clog lanes, to play, zone early in the down, which all devolves to man later. But you could basically just kind of take your 1 and erase him, and that's a great benefit. That's a wonderful thing for a defensive coordinator to have, is a guy that's that capable to say, all right, I just don't have to plan for him. You got him? Cool. All right, I'll plan for everybody else.
And it allows you to play 2-on-1 backside and 3-over-2 on the number 2 and 3 receiver front side, so a slot receiver, and let's say it's a tight end, right? You could play 3-over-2 on those guys. You could play 2-over-1 on the backside, leave Pat all by himself, and you're good. Like, you got numbers. You're fine. Just because you have that one guy where it doesn't matter who he's lining up against, he can take him away. I would say pretty much the main difference we're going to see in this defense in 2023 is less quarter, half, just because I've never seen Vance favor that type of coverage, but maybe he will just because he has Surtain. Either way,
if you watch his tape, he'll use it occasionally at least.
And Vance is a good coach. He gets a lot of crap, but he is a good coach, right? Now, maybe not head coach, but as a DC, you could do a hell of a lot worse than Vance Joseph. He's a very good coach. And a good leader. Like, players love him. Like, he's a good dude. He's coached for a long time for a reason. But yeah, no, I expect a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 1. Maybe a little bit more cover 2. They were like they were dead last in cover 2. Now that I look about it, holy crap, they were 1.1% cover 2.
Didn't like it.
Jesus, that's low.
Didn't like it.
So maybe that'll go up a little bit this year. Yeah. But anyway, so schematically speaking, a lot of similarities in 2023 with maybe some minor differences. Use what worked, ditch what didn't work, and see what happens.
And it's the exact inverse of what we say about all teams that run a lot of cover two. Like San Francisco runs a lot of cover two. Why? Fred Warner. It's like, oh, why did the Broncos run a lot of quarter half? Oh, Pat Surtain. Oh, well, who do the Broncos have at middle linebacker? Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton.
Yeah, not exactly.
Post runners?
No.
No. So you're just not going to run a coverage that puts your linebackers in bad leverage, right? Hey, Josie, you want to go cover people that can run really fast? And his answer is, no, I'm a very solid linebacker, but mostly going forward.
Looking at the coaching staff, by the way, speaking of the addition of Vance Joseph, we've spoken on him already. I'm a big fan of the Sean Payton hire.
Yep.
I am, what's the word?
Well,
less enthusiastic about Joe Lombardi.
Yeah.
But I also am fully aware that Lombardi's probably not going to be the one calling the offense, so I'll stomach it.
Right. We'll talk about the weighting here. And the weighting of a power structure in the NFL franchise is who's really responsible for what. We have lots of head coaches that are hired for their offensive prowess. And by and large, they call the offense. Even in what I would call one of the most successful franchises in the NFL, certainly in this conference and this division, Casey, Andy Reid, head coach, he's calling the plays. And so you can look at the head coach or the offensive coordinator, but it's what they really do within the franchise. Like, Sean's always been very involved with the offense. Like, he has been play caller, schemer, offensive mastermind in, well, largely we'll just say the Saints because that's where he's spent the last large chunk of time as a coach. He's going to do the same thing with the Broncos. He doesn't strike me as a guy that's going, oh, I'm late stage in my coaching career now. I'm going to delegate and do the CEO thing. No, he's still going to be very involved with the offense. He knows that's why he was hired. So Joe Lombardi maybe won't have as large an effect. The reason that we both have some reticence about Lombardi's hire is because he's been wasting Justin Herbert for a couple of years, and we don't want to see that happen. So I'm with you. We'll start with the GM, George Payton, another solid draft, and landed Sean Payton. Like, that's the deal. That's what he's being judged on. Got rid of Nathaniel Hackett, which was a failed experiment, quickly, and hired what I would consider the best available coach on the market. That's it. That's what he's being graded on. Great job.
Yeah, no, you can't ask for anything more. Like, if you completely mess up a head coaching hire and you jettison them within not even 12 months, within 10 months, right?
And it could have been faster.
If you bounce back, with your rebound being a Hall of Fame caliber coach that has won a Super Bowl, that produced some of the most productive, high-flying offenses in the history of the sport, yeah, you're doing okay.
You did great. So coordinators, offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, we've spoken on him. Defensive coordinator Vance Joseph, we've talked about him as well. Special teams coordinator Ben Kwiatka. And then other notable coaches on offense. Zach Strief is the offensive line coach. And yes, it's the very same Zach Strief that was a guard for a long time with the Saints. So he understands Sean Payton's system. Interestingly enough, he was a Saints broadcaster.
Yeah, no, first he was on their media team. Yeah,
and that's right. Then became an assistant O-line coach. This is his first year with the Broncos. Played 158 games as a Saint, which surprised me was the third most ever for a Saints offensive lineman.
Who's 1 and 2?
I'm guessing like Willie Rowe.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and then another notable offensive coach, Davis Webb, is the quarterback's coach.
Yeah, I saw when that happened. And, he was getting calls about being a quarterback's coach last year, decided he wanted to play again.
That's right.
Spend one last year. I mean,
One
he knew he had a coaching job lined up, right?
That's right.
But he wanted to, one last go-around as a player and then transition straight into being a coach. A lot of people think that he's the next Kellen Moore.
Yeah. And people have been saying that since he was drafted. He's going to coach. Like, he's going to be a good coach. So, former Cal QB. He was on the Giants active roster last season for his last ride. First year as an NFL coach, position coach in this case, and gets, I would say, one of the largest sort of reclamation jobs in the entire league. Like, make Russell Wilson good again. Big challenge. The thing that cracks me up is he's 6 years younger than Russell.
Yeah, I don't think it's his job to fix Russ. I think we're going to leave Sean Payton to do that because I think Russ is going to listen more to Sean than anybody else. But I think it's going to be a good first foray into coaching for Davis Webb, working with somebody as experienced as Russ, working with somebody as experienced as Sean Payton. And also, I mean, last year he got to, see how Brian Dable does things too, and knowing full well he was going to be a coach, right? Yeah. So he kind of got to pay attention,
notes.
Right?
Yeah, he's taking good notes.
He's going to be a great coach eventually. I'm really, really fascinated to see how his coaching career ends up, because if what we have been told is true, give it 5 years and he'll be calling an offense somewhere.
Yeah, it feels like he is very much a future offensive coordinator. Like, that is almost preordained. And then who knows? We know that the hottest offensive coordinators in the league usually get head coaching nods. You could see Davis Webb within 5 or 6 years as a possible head coaching candidate, which is fascinating. That's why we do this whole coaching section and all these, is so that you are aware of who's moving and shaking and making moves. And this is a very young coach that's been talked about for a while and could progress really quickly. On defense and special teams, Joe Vitt is the senior defensive assistant after spending a long time with Peyton in New Orleans. He has 42 years of coaching experience. His first NFL job was in 1979.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
Yeah. He's been doing this for a bit. He's seen just about everything. And then the outside linebackers coach is Michael Wilhoit.
Like player Michael Wilhoit?
Yes. Yes, indeed. 5 years of experience. First year with the Broncos after holding the same role with the Chargers last season. He played 80 career games with the 49ers and the Seahawks.
How did I not know he was with the Chargers last year? I completely missed that.
There you go.
Oh, well, good for him. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's working with a tremendous position group there, and now he gets some really fun pieces. The Broncos have some great folks on the roster in that slot. It'll be really interesting to see, again, what he picked up here in Los Angeles and takes to Denver with him.
Now, given all of that, I want to take a moment to kind of zoom in on the offensive core, so to speak, which Sean Payton will have the enviable task of trying to resurrect this year. In particular, trying to resurrect Russell Wilson. Looking at all of the weapons that Wilson will have to work with this year, I want to have a discussion about who is playing what role, who is most important here, and how productive each individual player is going to be. Because this receiving core is very hard to parse out.
Yes.
You have Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick, who are kind of like your twin towers outside. Mm-hmm. Patrick is one of the better jump ball receivers in the NFL. Unfortunately, was lost to an ACL tear before last year even started. He's a year removed from that. He should be good to go.
Yeah.
Cortland Sutton, when he's healthy, is a very good outside receiver, in like a tier below the top tier-ish type. Like, he's solid, right, is what I would say. I wouldn't necessarily put him up with like the top 15, but you could also do worse than him as an X, right? He's a solid X. Jerry Jeudy is more of an intermediate and kind of quickness threat, I would say. I've always been kind of underwhelmed with him as a deep ball threat. I think his ball tracking ability deep down the field could use some work. I think that he's a great separator. Mm-hmm. He's great at kind of working that 10 to 20 yard area. If you need a third down, he's going to get you a third down. But I also don't see him as like the complete do-it-all type, right? And then you have, KJ Hamler, who could never stay healthy, and it just hasn't really been a factor since he got drafted anyway, even though you and I were pretty high on him. But they brought in the young kid this year who is probably better than KJ Hamler, like even as a prospect.
Yes.
Better than KJ Hamler. Marvin Mims, similar-ish type of size, about 5'11", $180, somewhere around there, but is absolutely dynamic and electric and is a good deep ball tracker and is really good after the catch and is somebody who could get those chunk plays that this offense was sorely missing last year. Looking at all these guys together, who do you feel like, if you're trying to get like a value play, like if you're trying to figure out what Broncos receiver in this former dumpster fire of an offense do I feel good about at their, like, let's say, current ADP? Like, you're trying to put together a best ball roster. You're going for a $15 million prize because apparently we're eligible to do that, which
We are.
I didn't know going into this. But let's say you're putting together your best ball roster or any fantasy roster. Looking at all these ADPs, who's somebody that you feel comfortable with going after?
Comfort is an interesting way to frame it. I really like Tim Patrick. I think he is the more complete wide receiver of the two guys outside. And I love Courtland Sutton. You know that I love Courtland Sutton, but Tim Patrick's current ADP is 205, largely because he didn't do anything last year.
Yeah.
He should be fully healthy. He is a full year removed from the ACL because it happened very, very early. That's going to give him a, pun intended, leg up.
Oh, God.
As he comes back into the lineup. A lot of people are forgetting about it. That makes him wide receiver 87.
And for context, Sutton's going as wide receiver 48.
And in terms of value, if you can wait and get Patrick, who I think might outproduce him in this particular offense, way later, that feels like great value. In terms of Mims, who I like a lot, I could see Marvin Mims stealing Jerry Jeudy's lunch money by the end of the season.
And Judy's the one that most people are really targeting early. His ADP is like 41.5. He's wide receiver 22. Everybody's all in on Jerry Jeudy. You think Marvin Mims, in terms of that role, that separator role, the third down machine, working intermediate area of the field,
Slot with speed. You talked about deep receptions that this offense has lacked.
you think Mims is better at that role than Jeudy is?
I think he's going to be the apple of Sean Payton's eye by about week 6.
Is there, looking back at like past Saints offenses, if you were going to compare Mims to a past Saints receiver, who would it be?
Strangely enough, it's a guy from his alma mater, Kenny Stills.
Okay.
And I think, again, Kenny Stills had a very nice all-around game. He had some speed. He was not the biggest guy. He knew how to get open. He worked well in that offense. I can see Mims growing into that very, very quickly. Feels actually quite comparable to me to Stills coming out in terms of maturation. And I think he just does more things better than Jeudy does. Like, Jeudy, I think, is a better route runner and separator, and that's where it ends. I think Mims is better at almost everything else. You talked about deep ball tracking, overall speed,
Yards after catch ability.
catch ability to catch through contact. Like, I think Mims is better at all of those things. And when you look at, I think we get hung up on quality and specific qualities of any position. Quarterback, it's arm strength. We see a guy with a rocket arm. We're like, that guy's great. We're like, there's more to playing quarterback than a big arm. And we saw Jerry Jeudy coming out. He has great feet. He has like elite feet. And everybody went, he's going to be a great receiver. And I'm like, he'd be a great route runner, which he is. He's a great separator, which he is. The rest of it, he's been fairly average for his career. And so the difference in ADP, I don't think is justified at all. 41.5 ADP for Jeudy. Mims is 163. So if you're value hunting and you can wait, because it will take a while. I don't think he'll start week 1. I don't think he'll start week 2. I think a month and a half in, after a bunch of practices, with Peyton running his offense and everybody getting comfortable, he's like, man, that guy we're bringing in at number 4 makes plays all the time. Should we move him up to 3 and see how he does? Like, I think that's going to happen.
The big thing, I think, we're looking at his value, again, because this is best ball, we're not hunting for week-to-week consistency, right? Like, Jeudy, I think week-to-week is going to be more consistent.
Probably.
But in terms of the spikes, which actually matter in best ball because you're not setting a lineup, it's just whoever on your roster is getting the most points. That's what you get credit for, right? In terms of spikes, Mims could theoretically have larger spikes because he is an explosive playmaker that can get 30, 40, 50 yards in one snap. That can get multiple touchdowns in limited touches. I'm not saying that he's going to go out there and get 1,000 yards as a rookie.
No.
He's not going to. But there are going to be some weeks that tear your freaking face off. And at 163, if I have to choose between Jeudy and a bunch of other receivers that I feel slightly better about, knowing that I can come back and get Mims later, yeah, like if I want a piece of the Broncos passing game, I don't want to pay Jeudy prices. I want to pay Mims prices. Yeah. And we also know that Sean Payton handpicked Mims. He didn't pick any of the receivers on the roster. So Clearly, he has a plan for him. Yes, I know some cats just randomly spawned into this image. If you're watching the YouTube version of this show, all of a sudden cats just showed up on my lap. Yes, we did take a slight cut while he wanted up. And he's probably just going to hang out here the rest of the show, and that's perfectly fine with me.
Perfectly fine.
Shut the fuck up, EJ. Anyway, yes, if you also have pretty good feelings about Marvin Mims, or maybe you have better vibes about Jerry Jeudy and you disagree with us and you think we're absolute morons, or if you just casually want to win millions of dollars in best ball this year, check out Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code Bootleg. They'll match your deposit up to $100, which you can use on any best ball game you want to. There's a bunch of different best ball contests. Oh, of course, now he leaves.
Of course.
A bunch of best ball contests, including Best Ball Mania 4 with $15 million in prizes available. You could play pick'ems during the season. You could do like season-long higher or lowers on, rookie stat lines. Like if you feel like, the one I saw today.
For those of us that are true sickos.
For true sickos, yeah. Anthony Richardson's line is at like 2,980 yards passing, which seems egregious.
Don't tempt me.
Like he's going to be starting from week 1, and it's like, oh, I can throw $20 on Anthony Richardson getting 3,000 yards passing in 17 games? Sure.
Seems
fine.
Reasonable.
Seems more than reasonable.
Yeah.
Stroud was at like 3,000. Bryce Young was at 3,400, which that one seems a little bit more fair, but I'm like, Stroud's 400 less than Bryce Young? Like, what? Okay, fine. Free money. Cool.
Yeah, I'll take it. So I have a question.
What?
Does this officially make it under cat?
God damn it, EJ. I know it's Father's Day weekend, but you're going all in on being a dad.
All the dad jokes, says the cat dad.
I know, I am a cat dad. My brother-in-law, Tyler, who some of you have seen before.
Who made us wings during the draft live stream
wings.
2 years ago.
They don't have kids, so they celebrate Cat Father's Day and Cat Mother's Day. And they give each other cat toys as gifts to give to their cats because
seems perfectly
we're millennials.
reasonable.
We don't have kids. The world is on fire, and
given the fact that
we don't have the time to have children.
Yeah, given the fact that one of your sons is currently sitting on my foot. Like,
they want dinner because it's like 6:30, and
seems completely reasonable.
They're just staring at me like, "Dad, feed us fucking food." I'll get to you in a second, okay?
It says now, Dad.
They're being very pushy. Anyway,
now.
Promo code Bootleg. Where were we?
$100.
$100.
Match.
You guys know it by now. You've been watching this whole series.
That's right.
Free agency. Let's get to free agency, EJ.
We should go to free agency. So, in terms of losses, a lot of players here, I would say not a ton of players that were super impactful. The biggest loss, I would say, is Draymond Jones. Mm-hmm. Moves on, goes to the Seahawks, signs a $17 million contract there. Deshaun Williams, also interior defensive line, goes to the Panthers. Played 50% of their snaps, not as big of a deal. Graham Glasgow, the right guard, goes to the Lions. Billy Turner, the right tackle, goes to the Jets. Really as a backup. Another team that loses their kicker, Brandon McManus, moves on. Backup running back Chase Edmonds ends up with the Bucks. Latavius Murray, who was their leading rusher last year, but really number 2 on the depth chart, ends up with the Bills. Dalton Risner, the left guard, played 85% of their snaps, not back with them. And Ronald Darby, who was a big part of their secondary for a long time, but not necessarily last year, only played about 25% of their snaps, currently unsigned, but now with the Broncos. So it's kind of like Draymond Jones and a bunch of other folks who have played, different, significant, largely backup roles with the Broncos, but no major fire sale, shedding high talent, got to do a salary purge. That's not where they're at. It just felt more like what I would call typical offseason shedding for a
very average turnover.
Yeah,
very, especially for a new coaching staff. Like you kind of expect that, right?
Yeah,
they're always going to bring in their guys. In terms of the talent they did retain, by the way, that the new coaching staff decided they wanted to keep around, Alex Singleton they brought back, Cam Fleming they brought back, and Kareem Jackson back for, what is it, year 15 at this point?
Yeah, a lot.
Because he got drafted 2010. 10 by the Texans. So that's
13.
Yeah, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in that general. Either way, he's a DB that's played a shitload of years.
Yeah.
And I love him. He's great.
You know what I think? I think he's going to end up a section higher, probably like next year or the year after. I bet he ends up as a coach. He feels like one of those guys that's traveled around the league.
He's been around so long.
And he ends up being a defensive back coach or safeties coach somewhere. And, you won't be at all surprised that when, like, 5 years from now, it's like he's a secondary coach for X, played 15 years in the NFL. He'll be one of those guys.
And so he started his career as an outside corner in Houston. And then he transitioned later into being a nickel. And even back then, every Texans fan was like, God, I want him to play safety because he was the best tackler on the team. And that was the same team that had Brian Cushing on it. D'Amico was still there in like 2011, I think.
Yeah.
And, JJ was there, like I mentioned. Jonathan Joseph was there. Like, he was the best tackler out of everybody. Glover Quinn.
Yeah.
Like, if we needed a tackle for loss, it was going to be Kareem Jackson. Everybody's like, God, I want him to be a safety. And they never moved him to safety for whatever reason. And then he goes to Denver, and they turn him into a safety, and he's really freaking good at it. So,
Still playing.
He could be an overall DB coach because he's played literally every spot in the secondary, and he's played forever. He's a great locker room leader. I would love to see him get into coaching. Now, I know his kids are probably at the age where maybe he doesn't want to be away from them as long as coaches have to be away from their kids. But, again, tip of the cap to you, Kareem, playing this long.
Yeah.
Great dude. Love him. Third-party additions, by the way, what did they spend their money on other than Draymond Jones? Since they didn't want to pay Draymond Jones $17 million, they paid Mike McGlinchey $17 million. Roughly the same amount of money that Draymond got. They just turned around and they spent it on the offensive line because they realized that dedicating that many resources to Russell Wilson and allowing him to get killed probably isn't a winning business model. So they're doing whatever they can to try to upgrade protection at right tackle. Samaje Perine, like we mentioned, at 28 for a running back, theoretically still in their prime, less than $4 million. Till Javonte gets back and up and running, great.
Yeah.
Zach Allen, they got for less money than Draymond got, at like 15.3 million. And Zach Allen himself is a pretty good, I don't want to say like great, but good interior pass rusher. High motor guy, really nifty, super quick. I like it. Like, I don't think the drop off between Draymond and him is that big, but they got him for less money.
He had a very good year last year.
Very good.
And not a lot of people saw it because the Cardinals team was bad. Zach Allen, here to tell you, played great football last year. May not be a great football player, but he played great football for them last year. And there is not going to be a significant drop-off. And you save a couple of $1 million. I think low-key, that's one of the very best additions they made. A lot of people are going to look at the next one, Frank Clark, and that's the higher-profile name, and say that's going to be a bigger impact. I actually
Zach Allen was better than Frank Clark last year.
I think Zach Allen might be better this year for the Broncos, and a lot of folks on name alone would say, no, you're crazy. Let's talk at the end of the year.
Yeah, no, I really do like Allen. He's a way better athlete than he gets given credit for. Way more fluid than somebody his size should be. So that was a nifty little pickup for them. Let's see, Ben Powers, they also got from the Ravens. Really, really good guard. Again, they are trying to invest as much as they can into the offensive line because they realize that they cannot go another year with the offensive line at the state that it was last year. Marquez Callaway to be wide receiver 6.
Wide receiver coach.
Yeah, at this point.
Yeah.
And then Adam Troutman, again, former Saint. It seemed like Sean brought in guys that could help transition everybody else into this offense. Guys that knew the offense, especially at positions that matter a lot, i.e. receiver and tight end, because they have to know a lot in this offense. There's a lot of post-snap adjustments. So you bring in Callaway to teach the receivers how to read things. You bring in Troutman to teach Greg Dulcich how to read things with how much stuff they have to do post-snap. It's very, very nifty signings, in my opinion, to try to get everybody else up to speed.
And we have to shout out Adam Troutman because he has significance for bootleg football.
Yeah, we met over Adam Troutman, essentially, a couple years ago.
He is literally the second player that we ever interviewed together.
Yes.
when we walked into a room of players, and I was an audio guy at the time. I was a writer and an audio guy at the time. He threw a microphone in my hand and was like, "Go talk to him. I'll film it." And I was like,
We weren't even a show yet.
No.
We had known each other for like a day.
Yeah, literally one day. It was the next morning, and you're like, "Here's a mic. I'll film it." And I was like, I was going to talk to him anyway. What are we doing here? And I ended up talking to Adam Troutman, who is a tremendous guy, like in his own right. Fascinating story. Great athlete. Guy we really, really enjoy. But it's fun that he gets to basically kind of bring the gospel of Sean Payton to Denver under the new coaching staff, but has some bootleg significance too.
And then I ran into all his family and teammates
At the game.
They
Yeah.
all drove down like 14 hours
Yeah.
from Dayton
That's right.
to go see him play in the Senior Bowl. It was like a whole caravan of people from Ohio that came down to
Yeah,
Alabama.
they fed you barbecue and like the whole
Great
bit.
people.
Yeah.
Love Adam Troutman. Happy to
So-
see he's still in the league.
Yeah, for
Anyway.
sure.
In terms of the draft, small class, but a great class. Loved what they did.
In terms of how much value they got out of, 5 picks, great work. So we've already talked a lot about Marvin Mims. Really like that pick. That was round 2, number 63 overall. Of course, they didn't have a first-round pick because of the trade for Russell Wilson. Round 3, pick 67, linebacker Drew Sanders, one of my gems from Arkansas. Didn't think he would last this long. New to the position, was a pass rusher at Alabama, transferred to Arkansas, got moved to middle linebacker, really hit his stride, led a lot of the SEC in categories at that position. Kind of continues a Broncos trend of picking up like uber athletic linebackers that can play inside or outside. Baron Browning was in that category. Cooper was in that category. He fits right into that mix, so it's a great room for him to land in. Also in round 3, pick 83, they get Riley Moss, the corner from Iowa. We talked about him with Matt Bowen quite a bit. Matt Bowen being a defensive backs coach and a former Hawkeye, has a lot of love for Riley Moss. Round 6 might be my favorite pick. I love the 3 before this, but 183 overall, safety J.L. Skinner out of Boise State. The only reason J.L. Skinner lasts this long is he had a pre-draft injury, so he's not probably going to play this year. Love this player. Oversized guy, about 6'3", 6'4", runs like an absolute dart and hammers folks. When he gets back healthy, can't wait to see J.L. Skinner play for the Broncos. And then round 7, 257, way down near the bottom of the draft, center Alex Forsythe from Oregon, who I think might be one of the best pass-blocking centers in this draft. Now, not one of the best run-blocking centers, absolutely not. Pass blocking, right up near the top of the list.
It definitely felt like a class that was investing more in the future than I would say direct contribution in 2023 itself. Obviously, we do expect Marvin Mims to contribute in 2023. Drew Sanders is probably going to get some snaps here and there. Curious to see if it's at inside linebacker or at edge. I don't know if we have a clear answer on that yet, but I'm fascinated to see where they put him, especially because I think that he's going to could play a similar role to a Baron Browning type, right? As like a Sam backer.
Currently, they've got him behind Singleton as an inside linebacker.
Which is fine.
Preliminary depth chart.
We'll see.
And he did play better there in college, like much better than he did as an edge. But he brings all the edge skills when on a third down, you slip him to the outside and put him as part of the blitz package. He has extensive experience rushing the passer, so it's a benefit.
JL Skinner, also an investment more in the future than is in 2023. Even if he plays a little bit coming off that torn pec, it's probably not going to be till the second half of the year anyway. So, and that's a 2024 pick. And then Riley Moss, as a corner, drafted as a corner, but I would expect they're going to convert him to safety. I don't know if we have an answer on that yet.
They have him lined up as a corner right now, second string. I think they're going to give him the shot.
Just to see if he can do it.
And if he can do it, which I think he can, actually, it'll be fascinating to watch it. I do not think they drafted him saying, hey, we're going to move him to safety. I think they drafted him saying, I think he could play corner. He did very well at Iowa.
He's got good feet.
Yes.
He's got good hips. He's got good technique. The only reason why I thought maybe he'd be a safety is just I think long speed isn't quite there. But other than that, he's fine. And not that the long speed is like bad. Like we've seen corners play with his long speed before, but it's harder to do if your margin for error is a razor's edge because your recovery speed isn't the same as say Tariq Woolen or Sauce Gardner, right? It's It's harder to survive if you have to be perfect every play.
You can make a lot less mistakes. Let's put it that way. But I think they will give him a shot at corner. And they didn't do poorly in the UDFA class either. They brought in quite a few. There weren't too many that really tripped my radar. Who was on yours?
I would kind of whatever about PJ Mustafer. I don't know. I don't think he's gonna make
as a
the
free
roster.
Pickup. I'm fine with
As
it.
if they drafted him, I'd be like, oh,
There you
what
go.
are we doing here? But as a UDFA, I was like, fine, whatever. Thomas Incoom from Central Michigan, the edge, that one I was much more excited about. That one I was actually surprised wasn't drafted. Correct. He's a really good player. Wasn't too long ago they got Jonathan Cooper in the bargain bin in the draft, and we loved that at the time and said he was going to vastly outperform his draft status, for most people didn't give him a shot to make the roster. We said, no, he absolutely will, and they did. And he started getting sacks almost immediately. Income, I think, also has a shot to be a Jonathan Cooper type for them, being a rotational pass rusher that they get literally for nothing. Looking at the rest of them, Demontre Jacobs maybe is on the practice squad. Nate Atkins, I don't know if there's room for him there, but again, possibly a practice squad guy. Jaleel McLaughlin. Well, McLaughlin might actually have a shot. The running back room is kind of thin early on until Javonte gets back. But yeah, I wasn't super blown away other than, say, getting Thomas Incoom, who I think will be a contributor.
I was the same. Incoom was like, ooh. Mustafer was like, okay, for free, he could work out. That I think is maybe slightly below appropriate value, but fine. And the rest of them were like, all right, let's see. Like,
which again, it's UDFA.
That's right.
Like it's
your scouts
not,
saw something.
Let's
bad. See how they plug in. As UDFA classes go, it's fine if you pull 2 or 3 people out of UDFA class, even if they're practice squatters. It's a tremendous value for a football team.
That brings us to the overall report card, where we give grades on 4 categories: front office, coaching, offense, and defense, being talent for offense and defense. Front office, I would argue for up because they landed Sean Payton, and the balls to fix an error very early on and recognizing the error and fixing it. Now, we could have given them a massive down for hiring Hackett in the first place, but hey, they got Sean Payton out of it, so fine.
It's the this year report card, not the last year report card. And honestly, like we said at the top, getting Sean Payton, great. We'll forgive almost anything else because you've corrected the largest wrong, which probably will have the largest impact over the entire franchise.
For coaching, also obviously up, just because Payton is a huge upgrade, and if we did anything other than up for landing Sean Payton, we'd be absolutely insane. Offense, getting back Tim Patrick, adding Mike McGlinchey, adding Marvin Mims, adding Ben Bowers, they were already a talented offense on paper last year, but because of injuries and also coaching malpractices, they didn't play up to the talent level. This year, I would expect it to be a lot better, and their talent level just as a base is also a lot better. So can't do anything but up there. And then defense, we'll go with even. Losing Avero hurts because I think he's a great coach, but I also think Vance Joseph is a good coach, and I think that they also have had an infusion of young talent. Losing Draymond, in an ideal world, they would have got to keep him, but getting Zach Allen for cheaper, fine. So we'll just go even there. So again, we're looking at up, even. I think Broncos fans would be happy with that.
They should be, and the outlook is much better than last year for multiple reasons. The personnel front, the coaching front, getting away from what you labeled as coaching malpractice, which it is or was, just getting back to really sort of playing up to their power score, right? If they'd played up to their power score, they would have been an 8 or 9 win team, which I think a lot of Broncos fans would have been much happier with. This year, what do you have for them as a ceiling?
Absolute ceiling, I have them at 10. Mm-hmm. They do play in the AFC West, which means they have to go through the Chiefs. They have to go through the Chargers. The Raiders are, what's the word?
Odd.
Feisty?
You hope.
Like, I don't think the Raiders are going to make the playoffs, but I also don't think they're bad.
No.
So, that's 3 tough divisional games in a tough division. They have a bunch of other really, really hard games, like going through their schedule right now. They have to play against Washington. They got to play against Miami, the Jets, the Bears, who we think are going to be a lot better this year. The Packers, which I don't think are going to be like aggressively bad. Nope. So that could give them a little bit of trouble. The Bills should be great. The Vikings also should be better. The Browns should be better. The Texans should be better. Got to play against the Lions. I mean, the Patriots, that's a really good defense. Like, it's a really tough schedule. So I think their absolute max ceiling is 10, which if they did win 10 games in the first year with Sean Payton, I think a lot of Broncos fans would be ecstatic with that. My floor for them, I'm going to put them at 7. I don't think they'll be as bad as they were last year, but I also wouldn't be surprised if growing pains caused them to be a frustratingly mid team in terms of wins through the flashes of what we hope to be is a much better team.
Yeah, I'm going to go a game lower on both with a lot of the same arguments. I just think with the real brutality of their schedule, as you look at that, that's a murderer's row of games that they have to go through. It is the first year under new head coach, and there is assumption that he can resurrect Russell Wilson's career. Now, we think it's possible. Russ looks in good shape. We think the coaching malpractice will be gone. But there's no guarantee that Russ is going to be Russ again against a brutal schedule, getting to know a new coaching staff, a new scheme. I'm going to go with 9 as the ceiling and 6 as the floor. They won't be worse than last year, but if Russ doesn't rise from the dead and they have a couple of other injuries and it takes them a while to gel, we could be looking at that. I think it'll be closer to 9 than 6, but this is a team that is coming out of the absolute depths, and being in the middle of the pack would be a successful season.
They're hoping for a wild card berth, and I think Broncos fans would take that.
Sure.
Just get them into the tournament, and then they'll see what happens, right? That's all they can really hope to build off of. Like, again, this team is not going to be in contention for Caleb Williams. I don't even know if they can get out of the Russ contract, even if they wanted to. But
yeah, that's a tougher thing.
Like, I don't see this as the same as Arizona, right? No. Like, they're not going to be that bad. They're not going to be the Bucks. Like, there's levels to horrible, and I think they're the level above that.
Yeah, they're
and potentially multiple levels above that. So they'll be fine. I'm going to temper my expectations a lot more than I did last year, where I predicted them to be like potentially crazy in a good way. This year, I think they're fine. So again, hopefully Broncos fans, that even though it ended on a fairly tepid note, hopefully at least gave you some hope. And, looking at all the reasons why they at least will be better than they were last year, and why this football season ideally will be a hell of a lot more enjoyable in 2022. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Come back tomorrow if you want to hear a little bit about all the division opponents for the Broncos. We're going through the Raiders tomorrow, and then it's the Chargers on Wednesday, Chiefs on Thursday, and then a division look at the AFC West as a whole on Friday. And then we are rolling into the NFC South.
Correct.
Right? The week after that. And then I think at that point we're like halfway through this whole thing, right? Ish. I don't know. Time is meaningless now.
Time is a construct at this point. If we have thoroughly charged you up as a Broncos fan, and you're looking at your dresser drawer and thinking, man, all my Denver t-shirts have holes in them, you want some new gear, head over to homage.com. They're our clothing partner. They have an NFL license. They've got like 30 plus styles for every team. Some of the softest t-shirts and hoodies you'll ever see. We get a cut of everything you buy if you use the link in the description. So if you want to refresh your team gear, head over to Homage. Great stuff.
We'll see you guys tomorrow talking Raiders. And until then, later.